What up, everyone? Welcome back to Sneaker Convos. The name we're still trying to figure out how that works because we spent a couple of months thinking about this and running in a completely different direction. Got hit with a nice little polite little email that reminded us that we can't use South by South X SX, all the things that we plan to do. But it's actually a beautiful thing because that just means that it got bigger than it was supposed to, and we're having a good time with it. So it's been a fun week. These guys have been supporting in the comments. You probably saw Johnny before. You probably saw Joe before. It's been dope to like see this come together. I think like we all talked about it weeks back with no idea that it would become kind of what it became. But I think, we kind of always had in mind the conversation as we closed out, and shout out to the Sneaker Peek podcast dudes in the last conversation. All of this was like kind of leading up to like, how do we, do better in the sneaker world and kind of use this passion and the people and the connections to make the world a better place. And I think, it's dope to get to chop it up with you guys to kind of close it out because, Johnny, if you don't know Johnny, in the Sneaker Closet podcast, they've already been, kind of doing these things and incorporating the give back into what they do. So it's, I'll toss this to you, Joe, but like, this is super dope for me because, as I get to know Johnny a little bit more through these conversations here and then offline, it's like it has been with most of the people on this, it's like, we got very similar vibes. We got very similar goals, and we all kind of want to do better for the world. So, what's good, guys? How's you guys are a little bit later, but how's the afternoon treating you out there?
It's good. It's good. As most of you may not know, some people are like, "Oh, you guys do podcasts probably like full time," but I actually was rushing to get over here. I just got out of work. I'm like, come on, traffic is crazy. It's nice out, so everybody and their grandmother's outside right now. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Brooklyn, similar to the weather we had last week, and that not this past week, but the week before. So everybody's sitting outside, horns are honking because there's nowhere for people to park because all the restaurants got their restaurants extended out into the street over here on Court Street in Brooklyn. People are happy to be able to get some sun on their face. And so just to kind of go back to what Nick was saying, and give Nick some credit here. This was something that, kind of came about by a conversation Nick and I were having about how we used to go to South by Southwest, pretty much for the last 20 years. And we did this, Nick did a couple of panels for me at my advertising agency because I work in the marketing world. And we did these two panels during CES, and they went over really well. Everybody really enjoyed the conversations. So, I kind of threw a curveball to Nick and said, "Hey, man, what if we did something called like South by Sneakers?" I was like, I'm not going to do it by myself. And I certainly don't even have enough connections. I was like hoping he would take the bait, and he took it and just ran with it because we were talking about doing a handful of panels over the week. And then I think Nick ended up with over 30. And all of this, I'm going to say 99.9% of the work was done by Nick. All I did was tune in and talk to a couple of people and ask some questions. But I'm really, really impressed with not only the lineup, because that was really, really hard to do if you've ever booked like an entire week full of panels. It usually takes months, and Nick was able to do it in basically a few weeks. And the conversations this week have been amazing, and they've really been about what Nick had talked to me about what was important to him, which is, hey, how do we take the sneaker kind of podcasting world and just this the personalities, the creators, and have a bigger conversation about life, and take this passion that people are spending so much time on on a daily basis, looking at sneakers, buying sneakers, and say, hey, here's something else that we could throw in there. And maybe like for me, just working the little bit that I worked on it with Nick gave me enough energy to, satisfy that kind of sneaker hunger. So I didn't buy as many sneakers as I normally do. So that was a good thing. And that's why I'm going to continue to, hopefully Nick lets me continue to help him with this stuff, because it's very fulfilling. And I think the conversation, like we just had, the conversation we're about to have with Johnny, is really kind of something, the intriguing part, which is how do we give back? How do we take that first step, that first tiny little step to helping people realize, like, whether that's like participating in some of the stuff that like Johnny's done, and his partner Matt on the Sneaker Closet Pod, where just making something, donating the money to people, or donating socks, or putting together these things. And Nick will probably talk about these kids in New York that are gathering shoes for for homeless people and going around passing them out. How do we bring that all together, and come together as a bigger community, as opposed to this podcast doing this thing, that podcast doing that thing? Always want that stuff to continue, but how do we start thinking a little bit bigger and having a bigger conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been, I think like we all kind of individually, whether we're talking about the podcast world, the content creation world, or just as consumers, right? We all kind of do things here and there, right? Like and then we surround ourselves and we connect with people, and like, when you connect with good people, you reconnect with them, right? You do more stuff with them, you get to know them more. And then it's like, okay, well, like, a lot of times I think, like, in my thought process is like, when I look at sneakers right now, and I think, we probably talked about this when we first chatted a few weeks back. When we look at sneakers right now, like, at least on the internet, which is where we all have to look right now, because most of us are like, it's to and from home or work, and maybe the grocery store, but we're trying not to, like, continue this pandemic, right? So when you look at the internet around sneakers, and whether it's a Nike app or a Adidas app or Foot Locker or bots or all these conversations we had this week, it's overwhelmingly negative on the internet. And like the craziest part about that is, like, in the time that this pandemic has happened, like, I'm always, I think, overly positive and probably give people, the benefit of the doubt to a fault. But I'm okay with that for myself, because I've learned to just, like, embrace that's who I am. But then with the pandemic was really fascinating for us on the podcast side, because it became, a little bit of an escape from the negativity in the news and everything else that you're bombarded with, over the past, 2-3 years, even prior, right? And then, like, when Joe and I started talking, it became, even more apparent that, like, it was a two-way street, right? And I think that's, obviously we've had a good community around the podcast for a while. We've had a lot of supporters, and, like, you guys on Sneaker Closet, probably the same. But, like, then when you have something like this where you, like, shit hits the fan, and you really realize how important that relationship is, even though, we're not like, Joe and I didn't talk face to face for probably the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of us knowing who each other were. Right. And then next thing you know, it's like this for us on the sneaker history stuff, like, the Discord became like my safe haven on the internet in a way, and like doing Zoom calls with the group, and, like, just like that became the escape from the negativity in a way that, like, I didn't think about what we were doing as people's escape from that negativity either, right? And it's just, I think, like, I boil all that down to just say, like, it's one of those things where you, like, good people and supporting good people, and then you just, like, hey, let's just figure out a way to support good people more, right? And then once you start, like, I don't listen to a lot of sneaker podcasts, but I'm a podcast fiend, man. Like, I am, like, I listen to it at like 2 to 3 times speed. Like, I'm, like, injecting knowledge into my veins. I feel like Neo in the Matrix when I'm listening, man. It's like, it's actually funny because Mike mentioned on the Soul Searching podcast a little bit earlier today, like, what happens if you run into the Super Saiyan, like, somebody that actually, and I was like, that's kind of how I feel when I plug into the podcast, man. I feel like I'm just charging up. Like, it's like, give me more of that knowledge, give me more of that information. And also, like, the thing that I love about it, and I'll stop rambling and we'll get into the conversation, but, like, I love the nuances. I love the fact that, like, it's almost like podcasts and sneakers to me are identical things in different worlds, but identical, right? Because, like, Johnny can be like, yo, those Yeezys are dope. Joe can be like, I only fucking want those New Balances. And I can be like, I just want a pair of Reebok Questions. And like, we don't actually wear the same shoes, maybe ever, right? Like, yeah, there's some shoes we'll have some crossover, but that actually doesn't matter at all. We're just having the conversation, and we all have that unique take and that unique perspective. And like, we get to show a person through, the hats, like Joe's been flossing in the Hot Wheels jacket today. I mean, we can't even keep up. Johnny and I are just like, wow, t-shirts. I didn't know this is going to be like this, Joe.
I didn't know it was going to be a jacket day today, huh?
You got it. I figured like this is a good chance to pretend like I'm going outside into an event. And this is like a jacket I haven't gotten to wear that much. I got it right before the lockdown started. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to wear this jacket all this year. And this is maybe like the third or fourth time I've worn it since I got it. And I was like, well, I'm going to be on this. I'm going to be doing this conversation. I was like, I'm going to make people think that this is like my jacket I wear all the time.
Ready for that Daytona 500. It looks like that's what it looks
like. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting thing too. Cause like the other thing that I think has been fascinating about some of these conversations is like, that collectible nature, right? Whether it's sneakers, we talked about fitteds, trading cards, like the jackets, like the mongoose hat, like BMX skate, like there's all these different facets that I think like are just interwoven in the world today. But one thing that I think, just like what I wanted to get to in this conversation is like, how do we take all those interwoven things and do more good throughout? Because like we collectively have separate audiences, right? Like people are going to come from one podcast to the other. You're going to I'm going to say something that offends somebody, you're going to say something that offends somebody, they're going to go away for a couple of weeks, they'll come back in a couple of weeks, but collectively at the end of the day, I think like it was nice to talk to everybody and get to the point where like I realized that like, hey, if we could just like, somehow Voltron crew, like, come together and like put all these creators together to like, fight evil. Like, that's what I want to do in a sense, right? Like, I don't know how that's going to work, but I wanted to talk to you, Johnny, because like Joe was saying, you guys have done some, charity stuff already with the podcast. You guys have been doing this, I think, a little bit longer than, at least consistently with my podcast. It's been like 5 or 6 years now, but it's been an up and down and off and on thing. And that consistency thing has really only come around in the last like 2 years for us. But maybe you could talk to some of the stuff you've done and maybe some of the things that worked good and some of the things where you're like, hey, we got to change that approach next time around.
So, yeah, I mean, I can definitely touch on that. I got to say, Matt has been a real big stronghold and I guess you could say the bridge for the podcast, right? And everything that we do, I think we come collectively together to accept the fact that there's a lot of things that are going outside beyond sneakers, right? So like the other podcasts that, me and Nick were talking about outside the box. Like we're always trying to think outside the box, not only about sneakers, but like how can we support others that are going through different things outside of the world? Because it's not always about sneakers. We love these things, we obtain them, we hold them dear and true to our heart, and there's ones that get away from us and we love, right? But when we think about it, there are still people that don't have the ability to obtain the things that we can obtain. There's still people that are fighting racial injustice. And talking to Matt, I look at him as like a bigger brother to me, right? Because he has so much knowledge, but when we both come together, because me coming from a Latin family and dealing with those type of injustices and what's going on now with the Asian American community, it's like, how do we all just band together to fight the common evil? And the common evil is just the injustice, the hatred, the hate crimes, things of that sort. So it's like, how do we incorporate our podcast to represent and show solidarity to those things that are happening outside of the world. So for the Black Lives Matter movement, we decided to hit somebody up. We threw out a tweet. We were like, hey, we have a couple ideas. Can anybody do a design? And the community is so tight. Like the sneaker Twitter community is so tight and the connections are crazy. It's somebody knows somebody that can do something, whether it be for free, whether it not be for free, regardless of the fact, even if it wasn't for free, we would still pay for it to get it done. So when we did the Black Lives Matter charity, I guess you could say event or podcast episode, we created this shirt, and the design wasn't created by us. It was actually, someone who is now a friend of the podcast. And now, we try to keep up with him on a regular basis, but he's like, a designer. Like he designs logos for people. He does it for his job as his main job. And, we talked to him. We showed him a couple things that we wanted to do. I'm not going to take credit for the design. Matt came up with an idea. We gave it to him and we were like, can you spice this up? He spiced it up. And, the inside of the shoe just said more than sneakers. And it was an outline of a Jordan 1. So raising the money for that and donating it to the Black Lives Matter movement was really amazing to me, because it really hit home with everything that was going on while we were in the pandemic. Right. And with certain things that we talk about on the podcast, and I said this, last episode, is you have to learn how to deal with the punches. There's always going to be that negativity that's going to come around. There's always going to be that person that takes the time to listen to your podcast just to finish the podcast and reach out to you in the comments or in the rating and say, you're complete garbage. Like, I'm going to give this a 1 star. And shout out to Apple, because Apple doesn't let you put no stars at all. You have to put a 1 star. So, I mean, I'll take whatever star you want to give. Right. So, and like I said before, if you guys watched the previous episode of the Sneaker Convos, it was one of those things where, I really took it near and dear to the heart, where somebody said, how can you talk about, this man dying? That's not angering you more than the people rioting and looting and things of that sort. And I took that to the heart, and I really reflected on it. And the way that I look at it is, it wasn't me separating myself from what happened outside of the world and what was happening to this man with the knee on his neck and him passing away. May he rest in peace. But it was me more talking less, channel your anger from the looting and, the rioting, and channel that into how can we make the world a better place. It's such a vague statement to make, but how can we band together to show, like, we're not these type of people that are just going to riot and loot. We're going to really hit home. We're, going to band together. We're going to go take it to the House. We're going to take it to Congress. We're going to come together as a collective, just like sneaker Twitter and the sneaker community. If the sneaker community can shift into something, whether it be charity, whether it be how can we donate shoes, clothes to people that are in need, I think it's definitely a big step in the right direction, and not using the negativity like, oh, these cops did this, these cops did that, let's go riot, let's go loot. I think for the Sneaker Closet podcast, when we banded together, me and Matt, with the whole t-shirt idea, it was like, we're not profiting from it. Yeah, we got a shirt, but we also donated, right? So any $1, $5, $10, $20, whatever you want to donate is well enough. We're not asking for $100. We're not asking for $500. It's just showing that solidarity, whether it be donations, whether it be creating something that can show a broader picture of what's going on in the world. It took us at least a year and a half to really think, like, the podcast is more than just sneakers. It's just more than me and you. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on outside of the world. So how do we make the podcast about things that are going on? And, that was the hardest part, but I think we came together as a collective and we actually got it done. So what's going on now in the world with the Asian American community, with the hate crimes that are going on, we're definitely, putting something together to reach out to the whole community and see what we can do going forward. I mean, even if it's something small, I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world, right? You're actually making some bit of change, and not making change at all. So.
Well, Johnny, I think that you make a great point in the sense that, one of the things I always try to say, at least to myself and, to some of my friends in particular, my girlfriend, is that there's got to be a step one. You can't go from 0 to 100. You can't go from A to Z. There's got to be a first step, because if you start thinking like, oh, well, it's not going to matter, like, then you'll just never do anything. But I think that that's why it's so important what you just kind of reiterated, which is that, it's great to get people to help them take that first step. You know what I mean? Because like you were saying, maybe somebody made a comment, but like, I'm not tuning into sneaker podcasts necessarily to hear everything that I'm watching on the news. I'm kind of wanting to escape, but the news isn't offering me a way to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, or to help out. The news is basically, and in this climate, everybody's talking. And, I think that most people are just sick of it. They're sick of the 2% of the people on one side and the 2% of these people on the other side that are just really loud, and they take up all the space. So it's really up to us. And this is what I think is great about the sneaker community and what we did this week is that, hey, listen, we all know each other through sneakers, and it's like almost like we got a blank canvas. Like, hey, our relationship involves talking about sneakers. So how do I build on my relationship with Johnny? It's like, oh, I work with Johnny on on this charity and on sneakers, because like, we can't you can't know my whole life story. You might hear it over a few years, but that broadens your friendship and my friendship, and my friendship with Matt. And as you said, Matt being like your older brother, it's nice to have like a 45-year-old man like Matt, kind of helping you, educate you about the things to do. Matt's not 45.
Yeah, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me for that, but go ahead.
That's just a joke that Johnny makes all the time. But that's what gets me excited about being more part of this community, which, I'd always been a sneakerhead. Shout out to my mom for buying me my first pair of Air Jordans, black and blues, to protect my ankles when I was skateboarding back in 1985. But, my love of sneakers started with the Stan Smith. I had to have it, but it was above my budget. You know what I mean? And I really think that, the fact that kids are so interested in sneakers because we all got bit by that bug at some point when we were young, because it's like that was your individuality at school. And, it's not like today. I always tell people, I'm like, listen, if my friend got a pair of sneakers, then I couldn't get those sneakers because, I could get a different colorway. But like the worst thing that can happen on the schoolyard is, oh, you copied him? Like, because that's going to make you feel bad all day. So, and I'm still like that. I still am like, if I see somebody else wearing the same sneakers in my neighborhood, I'm like, I give them a shout out as long as I'm not wearing them. But then I'm like, I probably shouldn't wear those sneakers in this neighborhood because that guy already claimed this area. But I think what's really fun and what we can start to do together as, because the amazing thing that Nick did this week was he basically made all of our networks this much bigger, and hopefully it grows even bigger because, all this stuff's being recorded. We don't really know how many people are watching live because it's not convenient. Nobody's at a conference. So it's not like everyone's walking around going, oh, I'm going to go see this. But all this stuff is going to be on the internet on YouTube, and it's going to also be, in recordings so that you guys can post this as an addendum to one of your podcasts, because you'll be able to have access to it. And I think what we're really trying to say is like, listen, nobody's perfect. I am certainly not a saint, and I've done a lot of terrible things in my life, but I feel like I've done a lot more good than I've done bad. And I've never gotten arrested. Or I never got caught. So it's like one of those things where it's like, we're not here trying to say like, oh, look at us, we want to do good. It's like, no, I'm asking for help. You know what I mean? Like, help me come up with ideas, because I'm busy and I have some ideas, but I don't necessarily know who to talk to. But now I do have a whole community of people that I can take some crazy idea I have for how do we do some sort of charity thing. And I've been learning from you, Johnny. I've been learning from the Canada Got Soul guys. They do this thing that benefits charity at the end of the year, which also helps you show off your sneaks, called, Countdown CGS to 2000, whatever it's going to be. And all that money goes to Ronald McDonald House. And like, to me, that's the cool stuff that like I want to get involved in. I want to replicate. And I want to be able to hopefully, get some of these bigger personalities that Nick was able to snag this week to say, hey, you guys can influence. If you participate in this, you can really shine a light on it, because at the end of the day, the small contributions that get made are really great, because at the end of the day, you know, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, they're donating billions of dollars, but someone's got to get their attention to say like, oh, you know, how do we get the people who have a lot more money to donate? Because somebody made a really good point. I forget who it was. It was one of the podcasts, sneaker podcasts I was listening to this summer. And it was like, well, oh, isn't, you know, this person, I'm not going to call anybody out, that great for donating all this money? It's like, well, yeah, but that person, why does that person get to decide where that money goes? Like, they made a lot of money, but they didn't, like, in this world of capitalism we work in, once you start making, you know, tens of millions of dollars, you're really kind of taken away from a lot of people who are working just as hard as you. They're just not being rewarded because they didn't have the same breaks. And, you know, it's your responsibility to try to give that money back to people who don't need it, because you can't possibly spend it all in your lifetime. So just that idea of how do we get people with more money's attention on things by saying, hey, listen, this is what we did. You know, we got 500 people to donate $1 to our cause. Like, this is something that we need your help with. So that's something I'm hoping that, you know, I'll shut up and stop my rant, because Nick and I are a lot alike in that way. But that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping we can all kind of band together to do, at least, you know, here and there. It doesn't have to be like we're dedicating our lives to it, but I do want to dedicate at least a chunk of my time to thinking about it and working with other people that can all make things happen, so that we work together as a unit, as opposed to everybody feeling, well, I got to do this, and then I got to get the design, and then I got to get the shirts made, and then I got to figure out how to accept the money. If you can have a team and everybody does a little bit of a part of that, it's going to be a lot easier for us to make a lot of cool things happen.
Yeah. So we had you guys made some interesting points in it. And one of the things that Johnny said in the very beginning was like, you know, you want to make the world a better place, but that's like super broad. That's super generic. It's very, you know, it's very intimidating in a way, right? Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, yeah, if I had, you know, Jeff Bezos money, of course I could do a hell of a lot with that, but like, we don't, right? So like, then what I think happens for a lot of people is like, you know, that idea is super intimidating, and then you just kind of freeze and fall back and not take those first steps or that little bit of action that you can. And I think that's something that's really interesting about the conversation that I had with you know, the Sneaker Peek guys. You know, it's like, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, you want to do so much, and if you're a compassionate person, it's never going to be enough, right? Like, it's like the process itself is never going to be enough, no matter what you do. Because guess what? Like, unless some crazy stuff happens in our lifetime, there's always going to be things in the world that suck, and there's always going to be negative people. There's always going to be homelessness and hunger and like all of this stuff. Not to you know, discount like the Black Lives Matter movement that needs to be supported, you know, and that stuff has, you know, and not to dismiss like even the Asian American community now, right? Like, all of these aspects, you know, like, have to be addressed in some way, but it starts by like one step towards it, one you know, chink in the armor, right? Like, it doesn't seem like it's possible, but it's, you know, it's like, we have to just do whatever we can. And one of the things that also came out of the conversations, I can't remember if Megan touched on this in the you know, we had a conversation around what sustainability really is. And I don't know if we touched on it in that you know, sneaker convo, but like, she said something you know, recently in my conversations with her that kind of hit home with me. And it's like, you know, we have to think of ourselves as human beings, you know, in the same way of being sustainable, right? Like, you can't give all your energy away, or you won't be able to you won't be able to do anything, right? And I don't mean that in like, you know, conserve all your energy and, you know, just sit on the couch until you die, but like, you know, like, at the same time, like, I think of like, you know, the conversation from Sneaker Peek podcast, like, you know, we talked about putting it out there on social media when you do good. To Johnny's point, like, there's a lot of negativity on the internet, especially in the podcast world, the YouTube world, Instagram. Like, it's rough, right? Like, there's going to be people that say negative things no matter what you do, because whatever's going on in their lives, that's the reason they're doing it. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. No matter who you are, it has absolutely nothing to do with you. And when I think that, like, if you don't feel comfortable with it, then don't do whatever, causes that discomfort, right? Like, I mean, not in like, I guess that's wrong to say, because like I also think you should be out of your comfort zone in all ways possible, because that's how you grow. But like, if you're somebody that doesn't use social media as much maybe as others, don't go out there and post like something that that you feel uncomfortable with, if you're going to get negativity back from it. But I also think that for every one asshole that leaves a nasty comment and says, whatever they want to say, there's probably 10 people that you inspire when you talk about doing something good. And they're never going to tell you that, but they're going to think about what you posted. They're going to think about what you said. They're going to think about this conversation, 10 months from now, 5 years from now, and be like, you know what? Like, I don't need 1,000 pairs of shoes or whatever it is. Like, I'm going to make sure that I can give these back somehow, some way, because I heard this conversation about these guys doing it. And, maybe they're casual podcast consumer listener. Maybe they, hop into this as it sits on YouTube for the next, 20 years or whatever it's going to be. And I hope that every time that, that somebody comes into this and starts to hear these conversations, like, gives them a little bit more courage to take that first step, because it's one of those things. And, like Joe mentioned, before we started recording, I'm realizing, like, I feel like I'm pretty confident in who I am and the direction that I'm going. And like, and I'm thankful for the kind words from you guys and everybody that's, come together this week and been so supportive and, reached out with encouraging words and, like all the positivity that's come from it. But I also still feel like that's not enough, right? Like, it's kind of like, look, in the big picture, we're all Marvel characters, and until Endgame is over, the fight still goes on, right? And like, unless we always have that attitude, then it's always going to be a shitstorm.
Well,
like, let's deal with it.
Well, Nick, you make a really good point, and I'll make a quick point and then let Johnny talk here. But like, I don't know if you came to that talk I did kind of during the week of CES, where I was at the agency, because my background is, spent the last 10 years at one of the largest agencies in the planet. And I had a global role in which it gave me a lot of opportunity to talk to a lot of partners. And one of the things that we started talking about, which we, is a big topic, which is like, people boycotting Facebook, people boycotting, different news organizations that are spreading disinformation. But it's that whole aspect of grievance media. And the best way to help combat that negativity on the internet is really just to, not participate in it. Just walk away, delete it, get it out of your system, because it's not real. This person that's pissing you off is probably like a 14-year-old kid, you know what I mean? And he doesn't know any better. So like, getting into an argument with him is absolutely a waste of time, because he's going to feel bad enough when he's 22 and realizes, God, I was a dumb kid. So it's really about just kind of turning the other head, because, like we used to always say about, 2% of the tweet people on Twitter make up 80% of the tweets. And so it's like, you're talking about this tiny amount of people. And, I'm sure lots of them are saying positive things, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean? The internet gets me more angry than it gets me happy when I'm listening to what people are saying, because people have forgotten how to talk to each other. And that's why I thought this week was so great, is because what you organize is people are talking to each other. And it's not, hey, just people putting things in the chat. Most of the chat stuff has been positive, but really teaching a whole generation of folks that are used to texting, like, hey, talk to some people, have a conversation, be willing to be wrong or hear the other side. And, if everybody could just kind of do that and really spend some time thinking like, well, why does that person feel like that? Did they say something intelligent? But I think that we can help by constantly making it, like Matt from the Train from the Sneaker Peek podcast. When I first listened to their podcast, I was a little bit turned off, but then consistently listening to it, he kept saying over and over again, at least Wednesdays, like, my opinion doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you love this and I hate this. Like, we're just, we're just BSing on here. And to me, it's always great when I hear people just kind of take their ego out of it and say, like, listen, I'm not right about everything. I'm usually wrong about most things, but like once in a while I'm right, but I'm not trying to change anybody's opinion. I'm just putting mine out there. So I think it's really important for folks to understand that, like, listen, get off of your keyboard. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to make you feel better. It's not going to solve anything. And I'm not, putting anybody down that it's out there doing that, but I'm just saying, like, listen, for me, I'm learning, I'm 47 years old and I'm learning more in the last couple of years than I feel like I learned the first, 40 years of my life. And I'm feeling like my brain is actually working a lot better and putting the pieces together finally. And I feel grateful for that. And that's where I'm wanting to work with younger people and hopefully kind of share some of this knowledge the same way that, you can give somebody the cheat code to a video game so they don't have to spend all that time. You can just basically say, because if they know you and trust you and you can help them, like, you can mentor people. Like, I feel always bad because I've always wanted to mentor kids, but when you work in New York City and you're working 12, 13 hours a day, sometimes it's really hard to do that. And it makes me feel like a piece of shit sometimes, because it's like, I haven't made that kind of, decision yet to be like, no, I'm going to cut out this much time. But, this is my first step. Working on this project with you, Nick, this week is my first step, saying, hey, listen, let's start talking about more positive things. Let's see if we can work with some people. How do we put a project together to do something like what Johnny was doing with the podcast, what the CGS guys were doing? And I want to hear more examples of things that you guys have seen out there in the world that you think are really cool ways of raising money, or just cool ways of raising awareness.
I mean, so before I'm gonna let you roll with that, Johnny, first, because but like before you do, I would say that this conversation to me is like, it's a piece of who we are, right? And I would relate this to, like, me growing up and becoming a fan of Tupac is always kind of the thing I default to, but I could relate this to any music, any artist that has expressed themselves, right? Part of what we need to figure out is how to educate people in the internet world to turn that energy into something like, let's say a Tupac album, right? And I say that because there's all different facets of it, right? I'm not here to tell you to be positive because life doesn't suck. Life, like this year has been the hardest of my life financially, hands down, like absolutely hands down. It's been like, where's the income coming from? Can we make rent? Like all of those things that I haven't dealt with since I was a kid, and my, like we moved around a lot and all that stuff. But like I think of the package of like who you are, like sometimes you want to rage against the machine, you want to scream, you want to party, you want to go fight, you want to, like, all those emotions. I think we need to embrace them and acknowledge them. But I think that, like, you also have the, like, educational piece of that, like Tupac album, for instance, right? Like, like to learn how to, be this, like, celebrity and be this, up in the club, this guy that's screaming "fuck the world" on one track, but also saying "dear mama" on the other. And that's something that it's a constant working process for me to do that. And I, like, to Joe's point, like I'm 41, almost 42. It's a process, right? Like all of this learning I'm realizing the older and older I get, the process of learning, the process of dealing with the things that you don't even know about as a kid, right? And not that we should be telling, kids all this stuff, because, you want them to have that youthful joy and that experience, because that's what's going to carry over too. But, I think that's an important part of it, right, too. Like, learning about this stuff. And I hope these conversations really help people think about those things. Take that, if somebody's listening to that and you're normally in the comments leaving a negative thing, like hit delete on that, back up, disconnect from the internet, go listen to a song that makes you want to scream or yell or punch a wall or run a million miles, whatever that is, and then come back and say what you need to say, because that's the hardest thing for me, because I'm one of those people that's absolutely like rage, and to go one step further in this story, my girlfriend was not a Rage Against the Machine fan, wasn't really familiar, as familiar with the band. And like, every once in a while I got to crank it up and just, scream my head off to let out some steam. And she kind of was like, I came to the realization that, the first Rage album came out in 1991, 1992, whatever it was. And I was like, damn, it's been 20 years since that came out. And she's like, yeah, so were you the angry child when that came out at 12 years old? Or did this music make you angry? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that. But like, it's an important piece, right? And to Johnny's point, right? Like, how do we be the voices that say, look, we feel the pain, we feel the rage, like we'll be out there raging with you, but we need to do this collectively better to make the difference, right? And I think, like, not to go too political on all this conversation, but we've seen a lot of good things come from the terrible things in the last 9 months that, I don't wish any of the terrible things to happen. I'm super admirable, and admire those people that took that and ran with it in a different direction to get to a better place not completely, but a better place in certain aspects of it. So I'll quit, ranting here and let Johnny talk. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's good. It's good to hear, the perspective off of you guys, because you guys are, in your 40s and I'm about to turn 30. So it's like, you guys have those years above me where you've seen a lot of things, right? We've seen a lot in our years, and especially in like our personal lives. So, I mean, just to touch on the music choice, Nick, it's a good music choice. Rage and Tupac as well, but for me, it would have to be Eminem and 50 Cent. Just to, when I'm doing something good, I'll bump some 50. When I'm feeling like I need to, like, punch something, I'll listen to M, because it's just like M was and still is one of my favorite rappers. So it's like, how do I take those negative comments that were said or that I see and turn that into something positive? And I think it's really not just a growing experience, but it really tells you a story about yourself. And it shows you a lot about what you need to work on to actually put your best foot forward. So for me, I would always take the comments and I would be like, yeah, you know what? F this, F that, like just, blowing everybody off, just saying like, get the hell away from me. Like, I don't feel like talking to you, and turning that into, let's talk about it. Like, why do you feel that certain type of way? Like, is everything okay? What's going on? Like years ago, that wouldn't have been me. I would have just, bashed your face in or something. You know what I mean? But now it's like, with this whole year of being, for some a shitty year, for others, they were able to run with it, like you said, and actually create something really amazing and actually make a name for themselves. But this year, for me, financially, thank God I still have a job and I'm still working. Because I don't think IT is going anywhere. As you can see, we're on sneaker convos and talking to each other. But for me, it's just like, taking the negativity, making it into something positive for the next person that might receive that. And, for everyone that's watching this and from the conversations, just, absorb the information from all the sneaker combos that happened through this week. And when you're scrolling down your timeline and you see a negative comment, like Kicking It with Didi, she was talking about, there are men that aren't doing enough and you guys might just laugh about it. And that really hit home for me, because sometimes I'll just be like, that it's none of my business. Like, why am I even going to entertain that and just get into an argument with a person? But it's definitely the equality, right? And there's a lot of things that play into it. It's like, if now, me being who I am, if I were to see that comment that was made to Didi, then I would jump in and be like, yo, you need to back off, things like that. And obviously the block button is always key, right? But people will go to the extent to make another account just to bash you some more. And it's like, how do you continue to grow in a positive light when the negativity is just coming down? Because through the whole pandemic, you have, the whole COVID-19 happening. You have people having to quarantine, not being able to see their families. And some people use these social media platforms as an escape. And for Nick, for you, you have the Discord, and that's kind of your safe haven to actually like be in a space where there's no negativity, there's jokes, there's laughter. And I think that's what everybody needs, right? But it's like, how do we transform the negativity into laughter, into praise, into working with other individuals? Because there might be some people that are throwing negative comments or saying negative things that might have another aspect to them or a thought to them where they could be the greatest creator there ever was, but they just don't have that guidance. They may not have the love. And it's not to stir anything away from the people that are making these sorts of comments, but it's, how do we, like you say, like we all say, how do we band together to make sure that no man, no woman is left behind? Making sure that, you know, you're checking up on somebody. Like through this whole sneaker convo throughout the week, like I want to check up on everybody now, because I feel like, you know, through the conversations, a lot of things have hit home for me. Because when Didi was talking about what happened, it hit home for me because of my cousins, because of my family, because of my friend's family. And, you know, not saying that it doesn't happen to men, but it happens to women more frequently. And I think as the years go on, there's always going to be negativity. We don't know what this year is going to bring to us, because we're still fresh into the year. And it's been a whole year since this whole thing has happened. But it's just like, reach out to somebody, even if you don't know the person. Just be like, hey, I like what you're doing. You know, I would love to chop it up sometime. Like when Joe went on the podcast comments and commented, I'm like, who's Joe? And then we ended up finding out his Instagram and, you know, asked him like, is this you? He's like, yeah, that's me. And, you know, ever since, Joe has been an amazing individual. And now it just makes me want to get to know Joe even more and reach out to the negative comments and get to know those people. Because believe it or not, I went to go find those usernames on all socials, couldn't find anybody, because I just wanted to reach out. Like, why do you feel that I was coming off that way? Like, let's talk about it. Let's make amends. Like, what can I do? You know what I mean? And it's just having that positive light, but it's what actually drives you to have a positive light. Because the safe haven for me is buying sneakers, talking to family, making sure everybody's good. But when you look at other individuals, it's like, what can we make out of the sneaker convos? What can we make by reaching out? What can we come together as a collective and do to make things better one step at a time?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, the same thing, you know, Joe, I mean, I'm just thankful for you reaching out to everybody, you know, like your passion for sneakers and listening to podcasts and, you know, like the work that you do and having the interest that like, hey, how come these guys aren't getting more exposure for what they do? Because you enjoy what all of us do to create. You know, if this would have never happened, like, you know, it could be, I mean, the sneaker thing is interesting because like eventually you run into each other, right? But like it could have taken Johnny and I another 5 years before we actually run into each other in an event at the rate things are going, you know, who knows? And, you know, you are just as important in this equation in terms of connecting all these people, because I don't think that, you know, I think that the hardest part is like, we've gotten to a point, and, you know, this is not like, I don't mean this in a negative way, but we've all gotten to the point where we got to look at numbers and we got to look at like, okay, are we going to get an ad dollar here or a sponsor here or, you know, whatever we're looking for. But like, we don't actually reach out. We don't actually seek out the other people that are doing stuff to support the good things that we do. Right. Like, you know, it's impossible for somebody that's creating content, you know, for me, it's like 5, 6, 7 days a week, every day, you know, I'm plugged into this computer doing stuff. But like the other part of that is like, I could do better about going through sneaker podcasts. Like I got the headphones on, listen, you know, connect with Johnny. Like I could have somehow been helping with the shirt drop and like getting more people involved. So like part of it is like you doing this is hugely important, because my hope from all of these conversations, you know, is one, that all of us, you know, move forward from this and, you know, do some more cool shit together. But two, that more people that are listening to this go, these guys are right. Like I could talk sneakers, but I also want to make a difference, and I could start a podcast or I could start a YouTube channel. And like, that's like the craziest thing. we could all take action and do this stuff in ways that we never really thought. And I don't mean to like, this is not like get on YouTube, this is the future, or get a podcast, this is the future. Because I'm one of those people that spent 20 years working in sneakers and absolutely am intimidated to see my face on the internet. Like, it just is still one of those things where I don't feel comfortable with it, but I'm trying. This is part of my.
I mean, I think that's the point, Nick. Is that like everybody? You always hear that old saying about like most people don't try to do what they want to do because they don't want to fail. And there's the other one that you're not going to think about the things that you. Sorry about the bells from the church down the street, but. You don't want to be on your deathbed thinking of, no one was on their deathbed regretting things that they did. They're regretting things that they didn't do. I mean, unless you were a terrible person, you're probably regretting things that you did. But I mean, what we're trying to really get to is just like, I know myself, I'm shy. I don't seem like it when I'm here, but like I'm an introvert, but I'm also an empath. So like I feel stress around me and I have a hard time getting, being uncomfortable. Like I have to fast forward through certain uncomfortable things. I couldn't make it through the second season of the original Office in the UK because it was just too uncomfortable for me. So it was just like, you know what I mean? But like, and I find myself doing that all the time on TV shows, and I know it's not real, but I'm still like, ooh, it just makes me feel a certain way. But I think that the more when I've had people reach out and offer to help me, that makes me want to offer to help people. Like I like to think of myself as a permanent intern. Like something's going on, let me just help, because if I'm helping, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to more importantly get to know people. I got into the music business, because I was just offering my services because I just wanted to be around and I wanted to learn, and I did. And I tell that to young people all the time, like volunteer your time. Like you're gonna get more value out of volunteering, not necessarily just for charity, but volunteering if you want an internship or volunteering to, you like this shop, volunteer to go there and, be around the people, but build your community. And I think that that's the thing that, it seems basic, but, it took me a long time to figure this out, as far as life, and I'm still not figured it out. I still am trying to decide. I literally still am like, oh, maybe I can still be a film director. And then I'm like, no, dude, you're 47. But it was a big deal when I remember being unemployed in, after the financial crisis and thinking oh, I'm going to be a cop. I'm going to become a detective. I fucking love Law and Order. And it was nope. I was 36 and they were like, can't join, too late. And I was like, fuck, man, I'm old. You know what I mean? And I don't feel old, you know what I mean? And I know that my nephews think that I'm old, and I'm like, but I'm not. Dude, I'm still in high school in my mind. You know what I mean? Or at least part of me is. So I just think that it's really one of those things where the more we can offer to mentor people or let people know, hey, it's okay to reach out. And not everyone's going to respond because people are busy. But if you are polite and you're nice and you just say, hey, listen, I just want to have, talk to you for 20 minutes because I've got some questions. I think people will be surprised most often. People will like to do that. They'll like to feel like they're helping people because people have done that for me, and I'd like to give back. And I try to do it whenever people are, reach out and look for help. So sometimes it's just that, you know what I mean? Find ways to be helpful, and, talk to the people. And we don't see a lot of people anymore, but if people are looking for, I feel like people are looking for ways to help, but it's too hard. That's why it's got to start with step one. You know what I mean? Got to start with A before you can get to Z. So just do something small. You know what I mean? Go donate blood. That's super easy. How does that make you feel? Cool. Oh, how do you build something off? What's the next step after donating blood? Oh, volunteer once a month for 2 hours someplace. You know what I mean? But you don't have to jump right in and all of a sudden have that be your identity. You could just dip your toe in the water, see how it feels, and find the right thing for you.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's, my hope, the biggest takeaway for everyone, right, is that we're all trying to do that, right? And sometimes you meet someone and they're at that dip your toe in. Sometimes you meet someone and they're at that still staring at the water, I don't think I can do this. And then sometimes you meet people that are like literally swimming in, underwater for 20 minutes, and you're like, how's that person breathing down there? They're doing too much for others, right? But like that's also how the inspiration comes in, right? It's like, how do you, however you ebb and flow out of that, it's like, it's just the part of doing that I think, is what it ends up keeping you going, right? Like, I'm sure Johnny can relate to this, but like sneakers being such an up and down roller coaster for people, they'll come in and leave comments that, that absolutely annihilate someone. And just like, you're just like, whoa, like this is crazy talk. Like, I hope this one, like at first you're like, fuck this person, right? Like, don't come in here, and then you're like, 10 minutes later, you've set down the phone, got off, and you're like, man, like that person probably is going through some serious shit to be talking like that.
Or else they made a bad joke. It's like that's what I would tell people, since like, I'm old enough to remember when the internet didn't exist and stuff. And I remember when emails first started coming, and, you can't get context from emails. And I've been shouting that from the rooftops forever, because sometimes I know, someone, it depends on, like, if I'm in a bad mood and I read an email, it could be completely innocent, and I'm like all pissed off about it. And then that's why I try to make a point to, like, or at least when I work in an office, I like to get up and go talk to people. And people are, I remember one time this person's like, why do you keep getting up all the time? I'm like, I'm going to talk to people. They're like, well, just wait for them to email you back. And I go, I want to know that person. You know what I mean? So that being said, I want to see, number one, I feel like we've neglected to talk about sneakers, and I feel like we can do a real quick, what are you wearing? Because I'm really, got excited to pull out these Air Force 2 highs, because they were one of my first ones. And I figured if I'm only going to be on camera during this session this week, I'm going to put that Air Force 2 out into the world and make a plea to Nike to start making the Air Force 2 high again. But outside of that, I also wanted to put Johnny on the spot and say, Johnny, what are we going to do? What's our next step? How are we going to do something together? Or what are you cooking up right now? That you made it sound like you were putting something together. So after you show us your shoes, can you tell us what what you want to get out, what you guys are kind of currently cooking up, and how people can help?
Yeah, definitely. You want me to start off with the shoe segment first? Or
let's start off with the shoe segment.
Well, I don't wear shoes inside my room. I usually kick them off downstairs.
Assume you had to run outside to save a cat out of a tree right now. What would you wear?
If I had to run outside, I mean, I just brought my shoes upstairs, but I wore these. These are pretty easy to slip on. You know what I mean? So, the 380s, I think, are probably the most comfortable shoe that I could put on my feet.
Damn, that's a pretty hard cosign.
Yeah, I mean, they're really that boost makes a difference.
And what's your favorite shoe that you want to come back that hasn't been made for years?
Oof.
You want to see him pull it out of the vault?
The Spreewells.
Ah, okay.
Great.
Yeah, as a Warriors fan, it's a great choice.
Yeah, I growing up as a kid and seeing these photos and just like, wow, they really had like spinners on shoes, and was this really a thing? Like this was really a thing. And then you go into the car business, and then they're putting spinners on rims, and it was probably still a big thing in Texas. If not, it's just the 22-inch rims. But yeah, I think the Spreewells, a lot of people might joke and clown on me about that, but it was really an iconic shoe. I mean, I would definitely love to see them bring that back and just hold them for dear life. But they're definitely now, and I talked about this, which we're probably going to post. There's a shoe that really inspires me. So these are Dominican Republic, for a lot of people, inspired shoes. These were made by C's. I met him at a convention, not a convention. It was more like it wasn't Nike by You. I forgot what it was called, but it was in New York. I literally took a Greyhound bus from Boston the same day that I got accepted, because you had to go through the invite process and get an invite and then go there. So I met Gabby, who made a pair of shoes for Nike Day, and she calls it the melting pot. But Spanish terms is la mezcla. I got to meet her. I got to meet C's. And so, yeah, these are the Dominican inspired ones. If a lot of people know who C's is, he created the Air Force One that had the domino pieces on the front. So he came out with this Air Max, which has Dominicana on the back. And I'll say this time and time again, I think they're really lenient, Nike in general, just to let you put something above the Nike check. But yeah, so de lo mio, if anybody ever asks what that means, it just means you're one of mine. Like, if I go up to Nick, I'm like, de lo mio, que lo que? It's just like, Nick, you're my dude. What's going on? You know what I mean? So this is probably one that's definitely going to go down in history for me, just because I am Latinx and I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican, and you know, this is me. So, but yeah, so if anybody's listening and they got a pair of Spree wheels and a 8.5, shoot them my way. But yeah, so a little just to get back on the other track, I think. So what I was mentioning about the Asian American community, what I wanted to do is like just, you know, whether it be a shirt, whether it be shorts, we're in close contact with a print shop, and they also have a shop here in Boston called AWOL, and that's where we actually did the Black Lives Matter movement T-shirts that said "More Than Sneakers." So the owner is Asian American, and he's really cool. I think, you know, he definitely accepts the support. So, you know, just talking to Matt during the recording of the episode yesterday, you know, we were just trying to figure out, like, what can we do? Do we just do the same thing where we, you know, create a design, have it printed, and, you know, we just go with whoever donated and then they get it and we ship it out? Or do we use contacts or talk to people like Nick and Joe and, you know, Dee and everybody that was in Sneaker Convos and see if they wanted to collab on something, and just have everybody put their hands in the pot and just make a collective contribution, design, whatever the case might be, to actually, you know, help out this community? Because it's not only, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, it's not only about them. I think it's about everybody, right? And when I say everybody, it's bigger than the Latinx community. It's bigger than the Asian American community. It's bigger than me, Nick, and Joe. I think it's bigger than all of us. And I think, you know, coming together, and I'll continue to say this, just coming together and trying to figure something out. Because like Joe said, it's that first step. Is like, if you're scared to get, you know, put your foot in the water, you never know if it's going to be warm or cold. So taking that first step into moving into creating a shirt for a cause, or creating shorts for a cause, or even creating an embroidered hat for a cause, I think it's like, well, if it fails, it fails. And, you know, you can go back to the drawing board and figure something else out. But you never know if it's going to fail or succeed for the greater good that you're trying to accomplish if you never take that first step.
Yeah, so I think that that's great. And, you know, now you got my wheels spinning in my head about how I can help. So, you know, I'm sure I'll be in contact with you and Matt. But I also wanted to put a disclaimer. I am not, you know, I have zero authority when it comes to working with charities or anything like that. I know about media. I know about partnerships. You know, I know a little bit about a bunch of little tiny things that don't matter. But I think it's important that everybody that maybe watches this or is watching it to know that, like, I'm trying to become a better person, and this is how this helps me feel like I'm getting to be a better person, and it puts me on the hook for doing that if I say these things out loud and I say them to other people. So that's really something I want to make sure that people are taking away from this, is like, I'm the last person that should be preaching about anything other than, you know, hey, I feel like I've done some good deeds in my life, but I can definitely do a lot more. And that's what I'm trying to put myself on the hook for. And hopefully other people, I'm not going to inspire anybody, but, if I can help just that one little click, then hopefully that helps. But I'm also saying, hey, I'm here to help. And if you need my help or you want to school me or you want to tell me I'm wrong, I'm here to listen.
Yeah. And, to Joe's point, any way we can help, with whatever you end up choosing to do, or if you want to figure out how to collaborate, I think, for me and the guys on the Sneaker History podcast and hopefully everybody that's, been a part of this Sneaker Convos thing, it's just knowing when to make it happen. Right. And I think to what I was saying earlier, we get caught up in the, we're all forced to look at this analytics and numbers and that's great and all. But at the end of the day, you're doing something good. I want to support that however I can. And, it's not to say that you guys aren't doing good every episode you put out. Right. But when you're doing something that's good for the whole world, that's where I want to be none of that other stuff matters. Let's elevate the people that are doing this right now. Right. And I'm going to use an example that I heard, I think it was probably, back when the Black Lives Matter stuff kind of was, being talked about a lot on the news, but there was kind of this example of, if you're a parent and your 3 kids are running around in the park and one of them falls, you don't go make sure the other 2 are okay at that moment, right? You make sure the one that fell is okay. And I think that's what we need to do, collectively as human beings, whether that's a part of the sneaker community, whether that's, in all these instances where we've got these assholes out here, attacking people and doing all this dumbass shit. Let's figure out how we all can collectively go and support those people in the time of need. Because look, we've all been on one side or the other of that. The point is that we all collectively are all human beings. And I think that's where we just get caught up in the bullshit. And, and then we take that same thing and we go to, sneakers or cars or comic books or whatever. And then we get caught up in the bullshit and we forget about the most important basic thing because we get excited about where we're at with it. Right. And we're running and, we're doing our thing and it's easy to get distracted. But, I just to second what Joe said again, I happily want to support any of those things that you guys are doing. We could figure out offline, whatever, I think you guys should come on the podcast. We should chop it up. Joe's always proposing trades. I don't know if that's the right move, but I think it's hilarious. So maybe we do something like that where we mix it up and say, hey, look, for the greater good, this is going to be, kind of like what this Sneaker Convos is, right? We could do this every month or two, and make it a good thing that we always check in. We always have that positive thing, whether that's a t-shirt design, a charity drive, whatever it is, to give credit to all the guys that came on, all the folks that came on and talked. The Sneaker Peak guys had some drop some great knowledge around doing the little things here and there, and the Canada Got Soul guys came on and kind of really set the tone and being able to just have fun with it. I think that is ultimately going to make when we get together and do the good things that much better and that much more powerful. And hopefully, as all this stuff goes on, we eventually get to the point where we don't have to do all this, because there's better people in the world. And, I know that's a lofty ass goal, but hey, I'm really hoping that we can do that. And it's crazy because I really think I've been in the sneaker thing for a really long time, and it's been really fun and it's been a really wild ride. And I never thought any of this would ever be possible, ever. I never thought I'd get to do 90% of the things I've done in my life, but it's also sneakers are really influential in the world, right? They're very important to a huge number of people, and they're only bigger and bigger as we do all of our stuff. And we could actually turn that around and make it something that maybe means something more, more than sneakers, like you guys have said, that's what it is. And, yeah, it's just I'm super stoked that we got to have this conversation and that we've had all these conversations this week because, I think, going back to one of the conversations with Wex and Jacques and Tamara, at the end of it, Wex said, that he really kind of had a negative feeling towards the sneaker world. And being a part of our conversation kind of brought him back in to realize how much of a community there is here. And for me, that's always what it's been, right? Like, it's always been just a way to connect with people. And, it's really what everything is in my life, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, we all got to survive. So you take all that stuff away and none of it matters. But at the same time, like, sometimes it's the easiest way to actually connect with somebody and get to know them is because we could look at those free wheels and be like, I cannot believe they did this. I want a pair, right? Like, that's the best part about this stuff sometimes, it's like.
No, it's definitely, I think, just moving forward, it's definitely going to be a planning process. Everything is about planning. Nothing just happens, at the snap of the finger. And it's definitely a lot to think about. And just hearing the conversations throughout the week, there has been a lot of conversations and a lot of coming togetherness, I guess you could call it. I'm pretty sure there's a shorter word for that, but it's not coming to me right now. But there was definitely like that community feeling throughout this whole week. Was just like, you love sneakers, you love sneakers, you love what you do, you love what you do, you want to bring this out into the world. So it's like, how do we all just come together and do something that's like badass? You know what I mean? Like, okay, you guys are badass because you all came together as a collective and did something not for the benefit of yourself, but for the benefit of other people that are in a time of need. So
Yeah. Well, guys, I'm not trying to cut it short, but
my girlfriend just started playing the Dave Chappelle skit where they have that wrap it up music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
So,
I just want to thank you guys both for being a part of, like, pushing this to come together, right? Because, like I said, Joe, like, you're not giving yourself enough credit, because we wouldn't have even had these conversations had it not been for you just enjoying the content that guys like Johnny and I put out. And we just, it's super dope that you are passionate enough and get to the point where you want to reach out to people and talk to them about what they're doing, because a lot of people don't ever take that extra step. And to bring it back to our conversation today, right, that first step can mean a hell of a lot of different things. And clearly you've been doing it this entire year, the summer, the road trip, all that stuff, like, kind of got us to this point of like, hey, we got to all connect and figure out how to do this. And I'm exhausted from these 4 or 5 days, but like, I'm also just like, I'm on a high that's probably going to last, another 10 months, because it's like, it's completely reinvigorated what I love about sneakers in a way that I also miss drastically, because I haven't got to see people in person. So, I'm super thankful for you to have brought this together. And, and Johnny and I, in the conversations we've had offline, like, I'm just super thankful for you, Johnny, to be able to connect with you and like get to this point and grow with you. And like, I'm going to say this and sorry to put everybody out there like this, but I think everybody that was on one of these panels, everybody that tuned in and had these conversations this week, is willing to have these conversations. And those first steps look different for everybody that's listening, whether you're, 15 and, just thinking about sneakers, or to Joe's point, like, some people are 50, 60 years old. I actually, let me actually read you a text message that I got. I don't want to even think about like how old and how long I've been doing this, as Joe was saying about being old. So one of the panels, and I don't want to roll anybody under the bus, so this is going to be anonymous. But I got a text message from one of the groups that said, I feel I should let everyone know that my 60-plus-year-old mother-in-law watched the entire conversation session and found it very engaging. And then went on to say she found certain people even more passionate about like the sneaker stuff. So I don't want to. I'm taking out names. I'm twisting that a little bit to protect the old and innocent.
Yeah.
But like that's exactly it, right? Like, and I guess like in my version of that, somebody asked what my favorite pair of sneakers are, and that's an impossible question for anybody that's into sneakers, right? Like Johnny can say the 380 right now is the one he wants to throw on his foot, but then like tomorrow, like those Dadas show up and the Spreewells are the ones, right? The and ones show up, and like that's how it works. But for me, I always bring it back to the Chuck Taylor because it's the one shoe that my grandparents would recognize and be able to have a story about. It's the one shoe that I've seen artists in Joe's, world of music that have been a part of and done their versions of. It's been hip hop. It's been West Coast gangster rap. It's been the goth scene and the all black scene. It's been the motorcyclist and the Harley Davidsons. Like it is literally like the most universal. It's also like not to forget, like there's people that rock Chucks with the pop tongues. Like I can't do that. It falls off my foot. I feel like an idiot when I try to do that, but I definitely have tried to do that. But I just got to go back to just lacing them up and wearing them like I normally do. But like, to me, that's it, right? It's like the universal sign of like, we can all just like look at this and create our own marks, but at the same time be reminded that we're all the same and we're all trying to do this together. So
100.
It's really just a beautiful thing, and I'm so thankful, Joe, that you kind of pushed me towards doing this and planted the seed, because I think like on a personal level.
You haven't seen my evil. You haven't seen the end of my evil plan, Nick. So let's hold off.
You both deserve y'all flowers, right? I mean, you guys definitely came together, and
well, hey, thanks, Johnny. I hear Dave Chappelle in the background saying we gotta wrap it up. So
yeah, true. All right, guys. Again, thank you all for watching, tuning in. If you're watching this now, later, whenever. Reach out to the people that you saw on here. Tell them that you saw them on here. Talk to them about sneakers. Find a way to make a better difference in the world. Let's just not have all the bullshit. Let's just enjoy it, because, man, life is so much shorter than we really realize. And unfortunately, this last year has reminded us of that. So, but
yeah, take care of your mental health. Let's go.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all. And tune in. Make sure you guys check out the Sneaker Closet podcast. Make sure you check out Sneaker History Outside the Box, and we'll see you soon. Peace.